Pornography isn't just growing, it's outperforming the internet's biggest giants. Combined, porn sites now pull in more traffic than Amazon, Twitter, and Netflix combined. But as our clicks go up, something else is going down. Since the 90s, we've seen a silent explosion in male erectile dysfunction, creating what scientists call a crisis in sexuality. Is your screen time physically breaking your bedroom performance? With 82% of people failing to quit, we have to ask, what is this doing to your brain? Today, we're diving into the updated science of how we're accidentally hacking our own happiness. It's easy to assume this is just a guy problem. In most of the headlines and research papers, the focus is almost exclusively on male performance and erectile dysfunction, but the reality is far more complex. We often treat this as a gendered issue, but your brain doesn't actually care about your gender when it's dealing with dopamine. For women, the rise of high-speed, high-novelty sexual content has created a silent, often invisible struggle, while the physical failure to launch might be the loud alarm bell for men. For women, the impact often hits deeper in the realms of emotional connection and self-worth. New studies are beginning to highlight how problematic use can lead to a sense of emotional freezing in real-world relationships. When your brain is conditioned to respond to a hyper-stylized digital version of intimacy, the subtle, messy, and beautiful reality of a human partner can start to feel inadequate. There is also a significant layer of social stigma at play. Women struggling with these compulsive behaviors often face a much higher wall of shame and isolation. Because it's not supposed to happen to them, they are less likely to speak up or seek help, leading to a cycle of secret guilt that further damages their mental health. We need to be clear, pornography acts as a supernormal stimulus for everyone. Whether you are worried about physical performance or emotional numbing, the mechanism is the same. Recognizing that women are just as vulnerable to this digital loophole isn't about judgment, it's about humanizing the struggle. It's about understanding that we are all operating with ancient biological hardware in a world of unprecedented digital temptation. You aren't broken or weird, you are a human being navigating a technological landscape that our brains simply weren't designed to handle. And by acknowledging that this affects all of us, we can finally start talking about real, collective solutions. So, how exactly does this supernormal stimulus mess with your head? To understand that, we have to look at the chemistry of craving. Think about the last time you sat down to eat a meal, or even just went to the bathroom without instinctively reaching for your phone. If you can't actually remember the last time you were alone with your own thoughts for more than 60 seconds, you aren't alone. But here's the reality. This isn't just about porn anymore. We are talking about a fundamental shift in how the human brain functions in the digital age. We are living in a state of digital hyperaddiction, where your brain has become so accustomed to a hit of dopamine every few seconds, from a TikTok scroll to a Discord ping, that real life is starting to feel incredibly, painfully dull. It's a phenomenon researchers are beginning to link to a broader crisis of attention. When you can't even endure 10 minutes of silence without needing a YouTube video playing in the background just to provide some noise, your brain's impulse control center is effectively screaming for help. This is where the connection to pornography becomes terrifyingly clear. Porn isn't just some standalone monster hiding in a dark corner of the internet. It is the final boss of our high-stimulation world. If you have spent years training your brain to crave constant novelty just to get through a bowl of cereal or a bus ride, then a slow-paced, emotional, real-world sexual encounter doesn't stand a chance. It simply doesn't meet the threshold of excitement that your smartphone has established as your new baseline. In a world where you can swipe through 1,000 novel sexual partners in 10 minutes, how is one real-life human being supposed to keep your brain's reward system engaged? We have essentially turned our brains into novelty junkies. This constant scrolling, clicking, and switching actually physically alters the neural pathways responsible for focus and satisfaction. It creates a feedback loop where the more we seek out these quick digital hits, the less we are able to enjoy the present moment. This is why you see people at concerts watching the show through their phone screens, or couples at dinner both staring at their devices. We aren't just experiencing a decline in sexual performance or libido. We are losing our fundamental ability to simply be present in our own lives. Think about the supernormal stimulus theory. In nature, animals are hardwired to respond to certain triggers, like a bird responding to the brightest egg. But if you put a giant, neon-colored plastic egg in the nest, the bird will ignore its own offspring to sit on the fake one because it's more of what its brain wants. Your phone is that neon egg. Porn is that neon egg. They provide a level of stimulation that doesn't exist in the natural world, and your ancient biological brain is being hijacked by it. Every time you choose the screen over the silence, you are reinforcing a neural highway that demands more, faster, and louder. It's a digital numbing that bleeds into every aspect of your existence. You become irritable when things are slow. You feel a strange sense of emptiness when the battery dies. You find it harder to make decisions because your brain is exhausted from the constant processing of useless information. So, how does this constant digital bombardment actually rewrite your gray matter? Why is your brain physically choosing a glowing rectangle over a real-life connection? To understand the why, we have to go beneath the surface and look at the actual physical changes happening inside your head. Specifically, we need to look at a tiny but powerful area called the ventral striatum, the engine of your desires. To understand why your brain is choosing a glowing rectangle over a real-life connection, we have to look at the actual physical changes happening inside your head. Specifically, we need to look at a tiny but powerful area called the ventral striatum, the engine of your desires and the core of your brain's reward system. When you scroll through an endless gallery of novel sexual images, you aren't just watching something, you are effectively performing a high-intensity workout on your mesolimbic dopamine system. Dopamine is the molecule of more. It's involved in your physiological craving for things you need to survive, like food, water, and sex. But its favorite thing in the world is novelty. And the internet is a novelty machine. Here is the aha moment. 2 major studies have found that the ventral striatum actually physically grows in size due to heavy pornography use. At first, that might sound like a good thing, more reward space, right? Wrong. This growth is actually a sign of your brain attempting to keep up with an unnatural level of stimulation. But as this area of your brain changes shape, it begins to affect your reward processing, your decision-making, and your emotional regulation. This leads us to the most frustrating paradox of human biology: the difference between liking and wanting. In a healthy brain, these two systems work together. You want a slice of pizza, you eat it, you like it, and you're satisfied. But when you overstimulate the ventral striatum with supernormal stimuli, these systems become decoupled. Your wanting system, driven by dopamine, goes into overdrive. It screams at you to click the next video, to find a more extreme image, to stay up just one more hour. But your liking system, driven by opioids and endocannabinoids, actually starts to dull. This is why many people with problematic porn use report a strange, hollow feeling. They find themselves desperately wanting to watch porn, but once they do, they don't actually like it that much. The reward strength has decreased even as the craving has increased. Essentially, you are stuck in a loop of chasing a high that your brain is no longer capable of feeling. It's like trying to fill a bucket with a hole in the bottom. This physical rewiring is what makes it so hard to restrain yourself. Even when you know it's hurting your real-life relationships or your self-esteem, your brain has shifted its priority from long-term gains like building a deep, lasting connection with a partner to short-term, immediate dopamine hits. This change in brain shape is also why heavy users often report feeling more irritable, depressed, or anxious. When your reward system is constantly on, the rest of your emotional life starts to feel off. You're not just losing your libido, you're losing your emotional equilibrium. Your brain has been tricked into thinking that these digital pixels are a survival necessity, and it will prioritize them over almost anything else, including your sleep, your work, and your friends. So, is this addiction? Well, in the scientific community, that's still a bit of a controversial term. While the brain changes look very similar to what we see in substance abuse, most researchers currently classify this as an impulse control disorder or problematic porn use. But regardless of the label, the physical reality remains. Your brain has been hijacked by a technology it wasn't evolved to handle. How can you tell if this physical rewiring has already started happening to you? To find out, We need to look at the specific behaviors that signal your brain is moving from liking to needing. Let's go through the checklist. In the scientific community, we use a specific set of criteria to identify what's called problematic pornography use. It's not about judging your choices. It's about identifying a pattern where a tool starts to control the user. Here are the 6 levels of dependency you should be looking for. First is salience. This is when pornography begins to dominate your thoughts and behavior. It's no longer just a casual activity. It becomes a top priority. Are you staying up extra late just to keep scrolling, even when you know you have a huge meeting the next morning? Are you skipping out on hanging with friends or neglecting your actual work because the pull of the screen is just stronger? Second is mood modification. Do you find yourself reaching for your phone the moment you feel stressed, lonely, or anxious? Using porn as a primary coping mechanism to numb out or escape from negative emotions is a major red flag. It's no longer about sexual desire. It's about emotional regulation or the lack of it. Third is tolerance. Just like with any other high-stimulus activity, your brain starts to adapt. You might find that you need more frequent sessions, longer durations, or increasingly extreme imagery just to achieve the same level of satisfaction you used to get from a 30-second clip. Your baseline for what is exciting has shifted, and you're constantly chasing a fading high. Fourth is conflict. This is where the digital world starts bleeding into your real life. Maybe it's causing arguments in your relationship, or perhaps it's an internal conflict where you feel a deep sense of shame and moral incongruence, a gap between who you want to be and what you are actually doing. When your habits start damaging your interpersonal bonds, the problem has moved beyond the screen. Fifth is withdrawal. How do you feel when you can't access it? If you find yourself feeling irritable, distressed, or physically restless when you try to take a break, that's your nervous system reacting to the absence of its dopamine fix. It's a sign that your brain has come to expect and need that artificial spike. And finally, relapse. Have you ever told yourself, "This is it, I'm done," only to find yourself back on the same websites a few days later? Unsuccessful efforts to reduce or stop use are perhaps the clearest indicator that the impulse control centers in your brain, that ventral striatum we mentioned, have been significantly altered. If you recognize yourself in these points, it's important to realize that it's not because you're weak-willed. You are fighting against a neurobiological feedback loop that is incredibly difficult to break on your own. But why is it that the more we try to force ourselves to stop, the harder it seems to become? To understand that, we have to look at the twist, the surprising reason why your own guilt might be your worst enemy. Why is it that the more you tell yourself never again, the more your brain seems to scream just one more time? This is perhaps the most frustrating part of the whole journey, and it's where most people get stuck in a loop for years. We've been taught that self-control is a muscle, and if we just have enough willpower or feel enough shame about our actions, we'll eventually stop. But the science actually shows the exact opposite. There's a fascinating and counterintuitive phenomenon called moral incongruence. One study found that for many people, especially those who are highly religious or have a strict moral code, the amount of guilt they feel is actually a better predictor of addiction than the actual amount of porn they watch. That sounds backwards, right? But here is the twist. The more you shame yourself, the more you create a reward prediction error in your brain. When you force yourself into total abstinence based on guilt, your brain becomes hyper-focused on the very thing you're trying to avoid. Think of it like someone telling you, whatever you do not think about a pink elephant. What's the first thing you see? A pink elephant. By obsessing over not watching porn, you are inadvertently keeping those neural pathways firing. You are keeping the wanting system in a state of high alert. Even more intense is how negative emotions like the shame and self-loathing you feel after a relapse actually trigger the stress response. And what is the brain's favorite way to numb out and deal with stress? You guessed it, the dopamine hit from the very thing you feel guilty about. It's a vicious, self-sustaining cycle. Your guilt isn't the cure, it's the fuel. This is why forced abstinence often leads to a rebound effect that is much more aggressive than the original habit. Your brain creates a massive backlog of craving. And when the willpower muscle finally fatigues, which it always does, the relapse is explosive. You aren't failing because you're a bad person or because you lack character. You're failing because your brain is literally using your own moral compass to drive you back toward the behavior. We have to stop looking at this as a battle of good versus evil and start looking at it as a technological mismatch. Your ancient brain is trying to survive in a digital world it wasn't built for. When you remove the crushing weight of guilt and replace it with a clinical, scientific understanding of why your brain is doing what it's doing, the wanting system finally starts to lose its grip. But before we get to the solution, we need to address one more layer of the puzzle. Because as much as porn is a major factor, it isn't the only thing affecting our health and our happiness in 2026. To get the full picture, we have to talk about the blue pills and the other hidden variables that might be clouding the data. There is a truth we need to look at objectively. Is porn the only reason for this decline in male performance? Modern science is a complex web, and it's rarely just one thing. The sharp increase in erectile dysfunction cases actually overlaps perfectly with another massive trend: the aggressive marketing and proliferation of ED medications. Those little blue pills. Since Viagra was approved in 1998, the conversation has shifted. Are more people struggling, or are more people simply being told there's a pill for that? But it goes deeper than marketing. We also have to consider the biochemical environment we are creating. We are currently using antidepressants and anti-anxiety medications at record-breaking levels. One often overlooked fact is that many of these medications, while helpful for mental health, have a documented side effect of causing erectile dysfunction. It's a messy, confounding variable that makes it hard to pin the blame on just one habit. And then there's the role of neurodiversity. People with undiagnosed ADHD, for example, often have a naturally lower baseline of dopamine. This makes them much more susceptible to supernormal stimuli like porn or endless scrolling, as their brains are essentially starving for that hit of engagement. In this case, porn isn't the primary problem. It's a symptom of a brain trying to self-medicate a pre-existing chemical imbalance. The point is, your body is a delicate ecosystem. When you flood it with high-intensity artificial stimuli, whether that's through a screen, a chemical, or a marketing campaign, the ecosystem loses its balance. We can't just point a finger at one website and say, that's the villain, while ignoring the rest of our digital and medicinal lifestyle. Instead of just looking for a magic pill to fix the symptoms, we have to look at the source. We have to ask how we are managing our emotional energy and our neurological health as a whole. Because when you stop seeing yourself as a collection of broken parts and start seeing your brain as a system that is simply trying to adapt to an unnatural world, the path to recovery becomes much clearer. So, where do we go from here? How do you actually begin to rewire a system that has been overstimulated for years? The answer isn't in more guilt, it's in a specific, clinical strategy to take back control. It's time to stop treating this as a moral failure and start treating it as a biological puzzle. If you feel like your brain has been hijacked, the most important thing you can do right now is replace that heavy blanket of guilt with a clear, clinical strategy. This is where cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, comes in. Instead of just trying to white-knuckle your way through cravings, CBT helps you map out the triggers, the specific emotions, times of day, or digital habits that lead you back to the screen. It's about reprogramming your reward system. By consciously choosing to sit with the discomfort of a craving without giving in, you are actually teaching your ventral striatum that it doesn't need that massive dopamine spike to survive. Slowly, your brain begins to shrink that wanting highway and rebuild its ability to like the real world again. This isn't a quick fix, and it isn't meant to be. It's about reclaiming your emotional equilibrium and your ability to connect with others on a human level. If you feel like you're at the point where wanting has turned into needing, please seek out a mental health professional. There is no shame in asking for a mechanic when the engine is struggling. We are living in an unprecedented technological era, and we're all learning how to navigate it together. Share this video, not because you're admitting to a problem, but because you're spreading a solution. You're helping to normalize a conversation that has stayed in the dark for far too long. Let's protect our brains and our happiness together. Make sure to subscribe for more deep dives into the science of us. Stay curious, and we'll see you soon for a new video.